Hi, welcome to another episode of the Talking Insights podcast. Today we're at Congress 2023, back in Amsterdam, and happy to see you guys. Welcome. How are you doing?
We're great. Doing well. Thank you for having us.
Well, thank you for coming, and thank you for being the platinum sponsor.
It's been a pleasure. It's been a really so far wonderful show, and we're looking forward to kind of seeing what else is in store.
Fantastic. So, just for the audience, can you introduce yourselves and what Virtual Incentives does? And
Sure.
Just a little brief.
Yeah, I'm Nate Shelley-Reade. I lead the revenue function at Virtual Incentives, and we are a payments platform that's been modern and purpose-built for delivering meaningful payments to anyone, anywhere in the world. And in particular, that means we focus on things like market research and how we can deliver an engaging experience to respondents and use some of what we do in that process to help maybe drive things like quality or broad indicators, but really about delivering meaningful, special, and engaging rewards to folks at the end of that process.
Excellent. And Alexandrine?
So I'm Alexandrine de Montera. I'm Chief Product Officer with Full Circle Research. Full Circle Research is one of the highest quality online sample providers, global sample providers, and I'm in charge of panel acquisition and engagement.
Thank you.
I'm Danny Farkas, Director of Business Development at Virtual Incentives, and I'm working with many of our hopefully soon-to-be clients and helping them overcome a lot of the challenges that we're going to speak about today.
Oh, excellent. Well, glad to hear that. Congress is, this is why we try to bring people here and really boost the business worldwide. So let's start with respondents. So you said that respondents are the lifeblood of the industry. Can you develop on that and kind of what drives them?
Sure. I mean, yes, this industry can only operate with respondents, right? So they are truly the lifeblood of this industry. But yet, researchers, and which is a little odd because, you would think that research, they look at data all day long, they analyze the data, that they would maybe pay a little bit more attention to the respondents and to the experience that we expose them with the survey that we ask them to complete. But yet, it has been really at the very bottom of their priority. And even though we've had this conversation for many, many years, and I'm actually very happy because during this conference in Amsterdam yesterday, I participated in one of the presentations from the Global Data Quality Initiative that has been started with Esomar and many other international market research association, where we are now really trying to repeat and push this industry to really change the way they treat the respondents. Because if they don't, we have now seen data that the motivation of these respondents have decreased so dramatically that at some point it's going to be extremely difficult to have panelists join panels and complete surveys, which is going to be a major issue for this industry.
Yes. Yep. I was just going to add, I think the quality topic has obviously been hot on everybody's minds for a long time in this space, and it does feel like there's a part of it, not all of it obviously, but a part of it that is really related to the engagement side of the story. And I think, you've talked about that as well, and this notion that they are sort of two sides of the same coin, and at the same, while we have the ability to try to help make the process end to end more engaging for folks, that helps bring some higher quality respondents into the fold. And so I think we can talk a little bit about keeping bad actors out, but I think the flip side of that is you have to keep the good respondents in and engaged and coming back.
So how do you get the balance right?
Well, there are
age-old question.
That might be a few different podcasts.
Oh, true. But true. But can you give some examples? Just obviously not to go too much of a tangent, but I think it's be interesting to know.
And I think you've talked about some of the levers and sort of there's almost joked about like a Goldilocks zone of, there's some things that attract more fraud. more low quality, but too little or not enough engagement really only brings in sometimes low quality things.
I mean, yes. So there is fraud in this industry, but and we should of course focus very much about fraud. But let's not forget it's only a small portion of this industry, and we have a lot of very good respondents that are actually willing to take surveys and to provide honest and truthful responses. But we expose them to poor design, complicated questions, very repetitive questions that might trigger, in return, bad quality. Because when you basically treat them with poor design, asking them 100 times what their age is, what their gender is, when they actually have provided that information multiple times already, when this is clearly an information that is not going to change, then it's very frustrating. And sometimes their response is, well, I'm just going to joke and provide a fake answer. So bad quality design, bad survey experience leads to bad quality responses, leads to fraud. So that's on the survey design. And again, there are some initiatives to really train this industry to use best practices when it comes to surveys. And the first one being, the majority of people that create surveys actually never take their own surveys. If they did, we would not be in that situation, because they would very, very easily realize that there's a problem in the length of the survey. There's a problem in the way we ask the questions. We have these long grids. We have this massive list that they need to choose from, etc., which is very tiring, very boring. And then we have the motivation. What drives the motivation of a respondent or someone to join a panel? So there are kind of two major types of motivations. The intrinsic one, which is, I want to give my opinion. That's my reward. And then there's the extrinsic motivation. I am willing to provide responses, but in exchange, I want something like an incentive.
Yeah.
And from past research that we have done in my current company at Full Circle and in my previous company at Ipsos, even though researchers as an industry would love that people join panels just to give their opinion, the reality is kind of different. The majority of people that join panels and are willing to take surveys do it for the reward. And so both things should work hand in hand, right? Because even if you're very motivated to earn points or cash in exchange of your survey responses, you will maybe do it once if the survey design is very poor, if the experience is very poor. But if you provide them with a very good survey experience, then they will take more survey, a second, a third, a fourth. And that's what we need to come up with. We need to balance very good experience for the respondents that will drive excellent quality of responses. And in addition, we need to be fair with them, for every effort that they make, for every help that they provide to us, we need to reward them for it.
Right. So aside from the survey design, how else do you keep the engagement going?
Well, and I think, for our part, and there are other pieces of this, right? But for our part, we're not involved in the recruitment or the qualifying or the surveying of respondents, right? We're involved in the incentivizing piece. And to your point, it's more than half of folks that do participate in these things are really doing it for the incentive at the end. And I think for a long time, that incentives process itself was disengaging in this space because it wasn't integrated, it wasn't seamless, maybe it wasn't transparent, maybe it felt like there were sort of the bait and switch, or you were getting something that wasn't immediately usable. I think that's one of our big areas of focus, is making that process seamless, making it not disengaging. But that's sort of the table stakes, right? Just to make an incentive not disengaging, that should be sort of intrinsic.
Yeah.
But then how can we actually do research to understand what different kinds of audiences want as incentives at the end, and make sure that we're delivering something that feels meaningful and special? I think you've talked about in the past some of the really wonderful just differences that you can see in the return on investment of respondents if they have an engaging experience, and that leads for them to come back and participate more than once or more than twice. Or
Yes.
in terms of lifetime value, that return on investment
Yes.
can be quite high.
Yes, we've done some research that has shown that a panelist that has earned points and redeemed those points, because our system works with points, and I can only speak to what I do with Full Circle, but for every survey that they complete, or even every survey that they attempt to complete, because let's not forget that even though someone might be invited to a survey, that doesn't mean that they're going to qualify to that survey. There are a lot of hurdles that they need to go through. They have some screening questions, some quotas sometimes are full. And so the reality is that they only have, in average, 20% chances of qualifying to a survey every time they click on the survey link. So they might spend quite some time with screening questions, and in the end, not maybe earn as much as they had hoped for. But in any case, what is important, because we're talking to very different people, like a panel is a group of, males, females, all sorts of different age groups. They don't all have the same behavior. They don't all have the same motivations. They don't all have the same, hopes and needs and ideas of what is the best reward for their effort. So what is important to us is that they can find in our rewards catalog, in our incentive program, something that is going to be a good fit for them. And so what is important is choice, is having enough options within the rewards catalog so that they will be looking forward to the day they will be able to redeem their points towards either a cash option, or a gift card, or a merchandise, or why not a charity donation. This needs to be available to them, even though, choice is important, because, it's also dreaming when you browse the rewards catalog of saying, okay, I just have one survey to go and then I'll be able to cash out.
Right.
So even though it's actually really nice to dream about a specific reward that you might see in the catalog, in the end, the majority of them choose the cash reward. So it can be a PayPal, it can be Visa card, or it can be Amazon, you name it. Depending on the country where you're located, the options are not always the same. But what is most important to us who are recruiting and trying to keep our panel as engaged as possible is that we have found out that people that have redeemed have a much higher lifetime value, much higher click rates, much higher number of survey completes than anyone that might have enough points to redeem but has chosen not to redeem.
Right.
So the action of redeeming and receiving the incentive is one of the most important engagement action that a panelist can do. Earning points for each survey completes is very rewarding in itself. They immediately see on their points balance that they have earned their points, but cashing out is actually way, way better. And we have found out that multiple redeemers have even higher lifetime values, even higher click rates, and higher number of completes. So our role is actually to motivate people to redeem. And to motivate people to redeem, it also motivates people to take surveys. So it's just a great full circle because,
I like that, like what you did there. Yep.
You've been waiting for that one, on you?
Just came like that.
I'm sure.
Haven't even trained for that. But yeah, so it is key Incentives are really key to this industry because no one's doing anything for free.
True.
There's a great correlation, though, that the point that you made, that engagement around the options that you have. It's as we hear a lot of the questions on the floor here at the Congress, a lot of the questions are, well, what options do you have? Show me the user experience. What does it look like? Can I do this? Can I customize? And the way that we're changing the narrative a bit is actually showing them that actually this is a direct connection to engagement. So the questions that they are asking, while they are very rudimentary around like what options are there, it has so much to do with all the things that Alexandrine is saying. Hey, what is the connection between these options and the total lifetime value of a panelist? So it's exciting to have those conversations.
Trust is also important. When people join a panel, they don't really know us, right? So there might be like a trust issue at the beginning saying, okay, they promise that I will get something if I complete a survey. Is that really true? And so what is crucial is that once they have earned their points and they're able to redeem, that the redemption flow is seamless, that it's instant, and that we don't tell them, okay, so you've just redeemed your points, you'll receive your incentive in 1 week's time. No, that doesn't work. You redeem, it's like when you make an online purchase. You want immediately the confirmation that your purchase has been approved, and you want to receive your incentive immediately. So options are important, but the delivery of the incentive is also crucial.
And I'd add to that, I think that, and we're seeing this more and more, there's sort of an evolution of what are the right options. And I think what we understand is that as demographic shifts are happening in who the research community is looking to engage and respond to things, so too do their preferences evolve. And we've seen that with, we were talking about a stat earlier where we've seen in our data that Gen Z, for example, is much more likely, something like 3 times more likely to choose Visa over an Amazon, for example. Millennials are something like 50% more likely over older generations to choose a Visa over an Amazon. But there's also household income disparities. There's obviously multicultural. We talked about that with some of our clients in the past. And so I think there's the seamlessness of the experience needs to be there, because I think there's a fundamental trust component to having interruptions in that process. And I imagine that for any panel, the worst nightmare is you type into Google, is blank panel name legit or something like that, right? Or an auto completes or whatever.
Yeah, I've never done this. Right?
But that's a really hard place to be, and it's because at some point during the process, somebody's become disengaged and gotten frustrated and assumed that there wasn't actually that reward at the end of the process. And so we need to make sure that it's seamless, but then we need to make sure on the other side they have choice, they have transparency, but that the options that they're being presented with are actually meaningful to them as an audience member and to their sort of specific wants and behaviors.
And I think if we're doing our jobs correctly, the respondent doesn't even know that these players like us are even involved in the process. It just works, and that's exactly how it should operate.
Yeah,
exactly.
Are there any demographics that are more challenging for you to pick up? And how would you address that?
I think Gen Z in this space has been a funny one. I think there's been a lot, and it's not just to do with incentives. I think we've heard from folks in the industry that questions about where do you recruit folks from Gen Z? How do you qualify them? How do you keep them engaged? I mean, we talked about at one point the notion that there is just more competition for time and attention, and even if somebody is thinking about this, and we don't want them to think about it as being professional survey takers or things like that, but if somebody's thinking about that, the notion in Gen Z of a side hustle means that there's a lot of competition for ways to earn a little bit of money in your evening or in your weekend or things like that. So I think that's been one where there's been a lot of conversation about how do we engage them and keep them engaged, because it might be harder to have repeat respondents in that generation. And I think that's some of what we're starting to do, is try to understand, well, what are the things? And maybe it's not just Visa, maybe it's reloadable Visa or something like that, so that there's more instant gratification. It's more cash-like, it's more direct, but maybe they're more likely to want Venmo versus PayPal or things like that. So we're trying to go where they are and go where they're going. But I think understanding these different, I think that's maybe the challenge that we're facing is trying to be more tailored for each audience group in what we deliver. Because I think we're recognizing from a multicultural standpoint, from a household income standpoint, et cetera, there are different preferences, and making sure that we're meeting them where they are is important to us.
So you obviously you have the physical incentives, monetary incentives, you have the virtual incentives. I had to balance that out.
Well done.
What's regarding, so obviously you got your stuff sorted, but how do you ensure like that the respondents are actually telling the truth and not, aside from fraud, how do you ensure that they are being honest with their answers? And is that something that's a challenge, or is something that's easily done?
No, it's not easily done. It requires a lot of expertise and a lot of tactics. Fraud is part of this industry. And so there are a lot of security checks that are in place from the first click on a recruitment banner. So to recruit for our own panel. So we obviously, want to make sure that the people that we recruit are located in the country where we want them to be. We need to make sure that they are the age that they pretend that they are. We need to make sure that the email that they're providing is not like a temporary email. We need to make sure that the mobile number that they might provide for security checks is not a temporary phone number. We need to check that the postal address that they're providing actually matches with who they say they are. So there are a lot of security checks that are placed from the first second that we interact with a potential recruit up until they are deemed acceptable and entered into our panel. But that doesn't stop there. Even though we have multiple different security checks in place, internal and external, smart people pass some of these tests. And so we have to include also many security checks in survey. We find other bad people in these surveys. And so outside of the obvious fraudsters, the bots, the farms, etc., we also need to be careful with unengaged respondents. Unengaged respondents are not typically fraudsters. So they're not maybe, pretending that they are an 18-year-old male when they are the 55-year-old female. But they're just not paying attention. And we can't have respondents that don't pay attention, because if they don't pay attention, it means that the answers that they're going to provide are going to be of poor quality. So, there are some trap questions that are inserted within surveys to make sure that, they're paying attention. Some of them are very obvious. They actually can be very frustrating to good respondents that are paying attention. They say, I'm not that stupid. If you tell me to click on green, I'm going to click on green. But the reality is, some of them fail. So it's bad, but it is. So, we need to be able to trust the respondents the way they trust us as a company, that they will receive whatever reward that we said that they would receive. It's not a bulletproof industry. We try to put as many safeguards as we can. And I think that the majority of us are doing a very good job at that. But occasionally something bad happens.
I think the deliverability of our service alone is really geared around that trust that the people that we're helping send rewards to are, the good actors, or the folks that are in it for the right reasons. So we want to create this super seamless process. But going back to the idea of balance, you have to have those kind of, mitigation tools or things to account for either bad actors or, what folks that are not there for good intentions.
Yeah, and there's also a way for us to also safeguard our business. So we all have what we call a minimum redemption threshold. So, depending on how much each respondent gets for a survey completes, or for joining a panel, or for completing a profiler, or for just being screened out, they're going to earn a certain number of points. And those points can then be exchanged. If you set the minimum redemption threshold too low, and I'm going to give my example at full circle. So we incentivize people to join our panel. We incentivize them to take a profiler. And I think we're one of the most generous panel because, we give away $1.50 for each survey completes, etc. If we set a minimum redemption threshold at 2,000 points for $2, anyone could potentially redeem their $2 without even having taken a survey, just for joining the panel and completing a profiler. Now, that's not going to be cost effective for us because, we have invested in the recruitment of that panelist. And if it's too low, fraudsters will find a way to join the panel, complete a profiler with random or fake information, and cash out immediately multiple times. So that, to us, is an entry point for fraud. On the other hand, if you put your minimum redemption threshold too high, then it's going to take forever for any good panelist to be able to cash out. And that's very demotivating, and that's very frustrating. So it's all a matter of finding the right balance to minimize as much as possible the risk of fraud and to maximize the engagement for the panel so that they are able to cash out within a reasonable time frame. Now, that reasonable time frame can differ from one company to another, but I tend to say that any time between 1 to 3 months is kind of ideal to be able to cash out, especially since we know that multiple redeemers, are way more engaged. So the more they can redeem, the better for me. Because I say, okay, they have completed survey, because you can only redeem if you have earned enough points. And, the more you cash out, the more survey you want to take and the longer you want to stay on the panel. So it's a win for both the panelists and myself.
I also think it's an exciting moment because I think, to your point about these levers, there feels like there's a lot of experimentation going on in the space right now around the ways to design that. So there's point-based. There's a few organizations that have started up, and their USP is instantaneous, and you get sort of a micro payment per survey or something like that. There's others that sort of say, hey, you'll get paid per month that you've done at least X activity or something. So there's these different models that are emerging, and I'm not sure the data is sort of borne out yet what's working better or where the right points are. And candidly, I think it's going to depend a lot on who's in your audience, right? I think we know that B2B is going to behave very differently and want very different things from consumer. Maybe they want the same things, but they demand it, right? But it's an interesting notion. I think from our vantage point, we get to see, so there's the fraud piece and the engagement piece, and we get to see that, there's also a payment threshold below which the payments aren't engaged with, right? Somebody's just, it's not worth their time to even open an email or go back and find their gift card if it's 50 cents or something like that. So there's also this meaningfulness of the payment size that matters. But I think helping clients, partners, et cetera, figure out and dial that in for their audience is one of the ways that we try to help.
So we've clearly learned it's definitely a complicated, difficult, but successful balancing act. So what's as a final question, what's next for virtual incentives?
Well, I think in this space, our goal continues to be, how do we improve engagement? How do we leverage the place in the life cycle that we own and operate, which is the sort of the end of that process, but how do we leverage that to try to add value to the rest of the process? So if we can be highlighting quality or fraud indicators, if we can be doing the kinds of engagement that help re-engage or sort of further the engagement that a panelist has with a panel, I think those are value add things for us. And I think getting, we've sort of talked about this notion, but getting really much more granular in what is the right mix or the right reward type or the right engagement model or fulfillment model for different kinds of respondents, different audience members. I think that's the best way I think that we can help our clients in this space to deliver value is getting really targeted with what we do to drive that engagement and meet respondents where they are and want to be met.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to have you here, and we do hope you enjoy the rest of the Congress, and I think we'll be in touch for some. This is fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll make sure
Thank you.
to share this with the industry, and just fantastic insights here.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.